In these series of videos, we're going to talk about different swing theories. And the purpose of this discussion is to give you options to try out, to see what works best for you. And throughout this conversation, I'm going to be using an on-plane and a neutral grip golf swing as a baseline. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is how you should swing the club, but it does give us the best benefit for the purpose of this conversation. And just so you know, the closer your swing is going to be to neutral, the easier it's going to be for you and your coaches to problem solve in the future when things inevitably go wrong. Now, the first place we have to start is with the grip. Now, the grip is our only connection to the club, and it's extremely important for how we control the club face and the path of the club. Now, there's three types of grips that you can have. The first one would be a neutral grip. If we think about what are the fundamentals of a neutral grip? Well, your lead hand is going to be in the fingers diagonally up your lead hand. And if you look down, you're going to see roughly 2.5 knuckles of your lead hand. And this V here is going to point toward between your trail ear and your trail shoulder. Now we think about how do we put the trail hand on there. It's going to come in from the side, and this V is going to point to that same place between my trail ear and trail shoulder. So that's a neutral grip. It's going to be the most effective for you for controlling the face. But there's other options. One would be what we would call a weak grip. Now, what is a weak grip? That would be if we turn this neutral grip, turn everything towards our lead side. So these V's are now pointed more towards our lead ear and lead shoulder. Just so you know, the weaker your grip is going to be, it's going to promote more of an open face when you swing and a higher ball flight. Now, typically most amateurs out there are going to struggle with a slice. So I encourage those students that I work with to steer away from a weak grip and more towards a stronger grip, which would be the opposite. So if we turned everything toward our lead side, a strong grip would be when we turn everything more towards our trail ear and trail shoulder. And from there, that's going to promote a stronger face throughout the swing and a stronger ball flight. But all three can potentially work. There are players on tour doing all three, so I encourage you to try all three of them to see what works best for you. Next, we're going to talk about the takeaway, which is the first move in the golf swing. And the first one we're going to talk about is going to be the neutral grip on plane takeaway and the fundamentals that go along with that type of golf swing. And most instructors would agree there's not much disparity out there in the position to get an on-plane takeaway. And what does that look like? Well, with our neutral grip, when we take the club back to where it is parallel to the ground here, we want the shaft to be parallel to our target line. As you can see here, the face is going to be pointed slightly down to the ground, as you can see by that orange stick on my club face. And the club face itself is going to be parallel to my spine. So that is going to be a perfect on-plane takeaway for a neutral grip on-plane golf swing. Now there's two other options that you can have in the takeaway. And the first one is going to be very important if you have a weaker grip or where everything is turned more toward your lead shoulder. And if that is your grip, the matchup there would be it's really important to keep the club outside your hands in the takeaway. As you can see here, the club's outside and it's off of this swing plane stick that I have here. The other option would be if you have a stronger grip where everything is pointed more toward your trail side. From there, it's important to keep the club more inside your hands here. As you can see, I have it pointed more inside the plane line. Now, in all three positions, you also have the option of having a neutral club face, an open club face, or a closed club face. Now, this is where things get a little bit more complicated to see what is best for you, and it's going to depend on your tendencies, and I would encourage you to go work with your PGA pro to understand the best position for you. We're also happy to help, so feel free to reach out to us, send us a video, and we can give you a better understanding of what position club face will be best for you moving forward. Moving on, we're now going to talk about the halfway back position in the backswing and how we get there from our takeaway position. And like in the other videos, we'll start with that neutral grip on plane golf swing. And like we talked about, we got the club right on plane here, pointing parallel to our target line a little bit, face pointed slightly toward the ground. And we're gonna have, at this stage, just a little bit of set in the wrists. As you can see, my hands are just outside my right thigh. And then how we move from here, we start to begin to set the wrists, begin to turn a little bit, and we get to left arm parallel. In a perfect world, we would form an L shape between my lead arm and the club shaft. Also from there, if I drew a line out of the shaft, it would be pointing at the ball or between or to my toes. So there's a range there of being on plane. Anywhere from pointing at the ball to between my toes would be an on-plane backswing. Now, wrist set, how do you determine what would be the best wrist set for you? Everyone is a little bit different, but it's gonna be rare to see someone that's really narrow or extremely wide. Typically somewhere in the middle. In a perfect world, we would have that nice L shape, but a great drill to determine what's best for you would just be grab the club like you're gripping it, start with the club head forward and just swing it back to left arm parallel. However you naturally set your wrists, that's where you should be left arm parallel. Now, there's some other options at this position in the golf swing. The first one would be if you have this club face or the club pointed outside the ball. This would be forming what we would call a flatter backswing. And there's some fundamentals to match that up to top of backswing. The other option would be a much steeper halfway back position where this club shaft is pointed more toward the middle of my feet. And likewise, there are going to be some fundamentals that are going to be to match that up as we move into the next segment of the backswing. Now we've talked about getting into a great halfway back position. How do we then move into the top of backswing? Well, let's talk about that neutral grip on plane swing. So we're at this halfway back position, L shape pointing at the ball. From here, most of our work is done. All we have to do is finish our rotation from our lower body and our upper body. From that, the best thing is we're going to finish turning that trail hip, straightening that trail leg a little bit, and we're going to finish that shoulder turn to where it is roughly 90 degrees. And to be on plane, if I drew a line out of this club, it would also point at the ball. So that would be a perfect on plane neutral top of backswing position. Now there's two other options that you could have at top of backswing. The first one would be a laid off position, which would mean that the club head is pointing to the left of the target and the club's pointing outside my ball. That would be more of a Sergio Garcia. He's going to be laid off, pointed around him, but he still plays great golf, as we all know. The other option would be what we would call across the line. So this would be where the club head is pointed left of target, and if I drew a line outside of my club, it would point behind me or behind the ball. Think of more of a John Daly or a Davis Love would be more in that position there. Previously, we talked about that half backswing position. And if you are more to where you're flatter halfway back, pointing that club outside the ball, that is going to lead to more of a laid off position at the top. That's what's going to match up best with that position. Conversely, if you're very steep going back and that club's pointing more towards your feet, that's going to lead to more of a longer across the line position, and that's going to give you the best matchup to give you the best opportunity to play your best from those positions. Now the fun really begins as we get to talk about the transition and getting the club down into the delivery position, which really is the only commonality among all great players. They get the club in the proper delivery position that matches up with the shot shape that they're trying to play. How do we do that? We will start with that on-plane neutral grip backswing. As we're up, we're at the top. We're in a great position. And from here, the first move is we're going to start to shift our lower body toward our lead side, which is going to help what we would call shallow the club. Now, shallowing has been a very hot topic on the internet. All you got to do is Google how to shallow the club, and there'll be hundreds of videos that show up. In my opinion, it's been overblown. Yes, you need to shallow the club if you have an on-plane golf swing in the backswing, but not that much. Just that small shift to the left, to your lead side, will help shallow it out as you start to lower your arms. But a couple things to keep in mind Important to keep that lead wrist as flat or bowed as possible, because that is going to promote just a slight shallowing. If we go into that cup of that left wrist at all, that's going to lead to that steepening, which is not what we want. So to review, we're at the top. We're going to shift our lower body to target while keeping our shoulders closed. We're going to lower our arms until we get down here into the delivery position where the club head, the shaft is going to be roughly parallel to our target line. The face is going to be pointed slightly to the ground. A lot of people want to get that toe to the sky. Important to get that face ready for delivery and have it pointed slightly to the ground. Now, how about those other two backswing positions that we talked about, laid off and across the line? First, let's talk about laid off. So if you're laid off in more of a Sergio Garcia position at the top, you are already in a very shallow position. So you don't need to shallow the club that much. Actually, the force that you're going to apply to get that club back in balance is actually a slight steepener. So you're going to apply a little bit more of a steepener move to it, but the club's still shallow. It's still pointed outside the ball. And then from there, you could just rotate. Because the club's behind you, because you don't need it shallow, really the focus is mostly rotation. You can have a slight lateral move, but mostly rotation. Also, important to note, when that club is laid off, it's going to want to promote that club kicking a little bit more out in front of you in that delivery position, which is going to promote more of a left to right shot. So it's going to take that left side of the golf course out of play. Conversely, let's talk about that across the line position at the top, where you're a little bit longer, a little more across the line. Now it is extremely important to focus on shallowing. And how we do that is that shift to the left, but our big advocate here is time. You have to be extremely patient in that transition when you're long and across the line to give that club time to shallow out and get back in balance halfway down. Now, when you are across the line at the top, this is going to promote more of an in to out motion, or more of that draw motion, which will take more of the right side out of play. So when you're halfway down, that club is going to be a little bit more inside the plane line coming down. The moment of truth, impact position, which is going to determine really where the ball ends up flying. If we think about how we get from that great delivery position we were in and that on-plane neutral swing, we just continue to move to our lead side here. We're going to start to straighten that lead leg. We're going to come off of that trail toe, or heel, excuse me. Important to keep that heel in front of the toe there. We don't want to be rolling on the outside of it. We want to stay on the inside. Keep our chest down. Hips are going to be slightly open, shoulders slightly open, and hands ahead of the ball. Important to be mindful of that face. If I just stick my hands in front of the club, you can see how the face is wide open. So we got to feel like we keep that lead wrist flat. And this is that perfect impact position. Now, it will be fundamental really across all three of those three swing positions that I talked about. The only differences would be if you're more of that around laid off position, you will be slightly more open with your hips and shoulders at impact, and that's going to promote more of that left to right shot. Conversely, if you're that longer across the line position, you'll be a little bit more square with your hips and shoulders to produce more of that in to out and draw biased swing. Now let's finish it off with a great follow through or a great finish, which is really important for the golf swing. I know my first instructor always told me, hold your finish until the ball lands. And that's something I still think about to this day. Now, how do we get into that perfect finish position? From that really good impact position, we're on our lead side, we're putting good pressure on the ball, good control of the face. Best way to feel your finish is just put the club in front of the ball and then just turn to the top. Fundamentals to think about here, our knees are going to be touching. The club head is going to be directly between my ears. So it's going to be bisecting my ears. My lead arm is going to be at 90 degrees, and I'm going to be tilted slightly to the right as a right-hander. That is the perfect finish position. A lot of times if I'm struggling, I will go into that position and just really focus on getting in that great finish. and subconsciously you will reverse engineer your swing and get yourself into some really good positions. So something to think about if you're struggling. Now, that will produce that neutral flight, not too high, not too low, that good follow through. If we're trying to hit a little bit of a lower shot, there are going to be some setup changes we'll make, moving the ball back, slightly open stance. But from there, we're also going to focus on finishing a little bit lower. We're not going to go all the way to that full finish, and our hands are going to be a little bit lower. Conversely, if we're trying to hit it high, we're going to think really high with our hands, and we're going to finish with this club head up over our head. So that's how you can kind of think about producing different flights with just your follow through. Now, also important to note, there are 3 different types of release patterns. Now, these are going to be the hold release, the roll release, or the under release. Now, understanding which one of these would be best for you, it's fairly complicated. Just like I talked about in the takeaway, there's going to be 3 different club face positions. These are going to be 3 different fall through positions. Now, you can experiment with the 3 different ones, but we highly recommend you go visit your PGA Pro or send us a video so we can help you work through what would be best for you as you're working through that release and getting into that great finish position.